Hi, Minesh here, and I'm really excited to interview and bring along my guest here, Elisabeth Stitt. And we have fun things in common. We have known each other for a while. She's an author as well, just like I have books, but her books are related to parenting. Mine are related more to business. So, Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So your topic is joyful parenting. And I think that sounds like a great title for people to hear. My podcast here is positive parenting. And again, we have different ways to look at different things. And I want you to be able to bring some clarity to people who are maybe confused about parenting. What should they do? How they should actually bring up children today with this crazy environment we live in today compared to what we used to. So many different people. So before we jump into your expertise here, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you live, a little bit about you and your family.
Sure. I come to parenting coaching from 25 years of teaching public school, mostly middle school. I taught every grade in some way or another except 11th grade. But most of my years were spent with middle school kids. And over the 25 years, I saw a shift in my parents. And well, first in the kids. And there was kind of a period where I was feeling really cross with parents because they seemed to be like getting in the way of my kids becoming who they needed to become. But then I got a chance to really speak to parents more deeply, not just the parent teacher conference, this is what I have to tell you, but more from the listening point of view. And I realized, this is 2014 now, how overwhelmed, anxious, and guilty parents were feeling. And I just kept thinking, oh my goodness, it does not have to be, it's always going to be demanding, right? It's a very on the job, but it doesn't have to be so hard. And it certainly doesn't have to be so lonely. So I gave up my tenure teaching job and jumped into entrepreneurship. And that's been the last 10 years.
Well, that's awesome. As a trivia for the two of us, uh, you are you like Indian food because your husband is from South India.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, my wife is Chinese, but she does cook Indian food for me. So she does a great job. And she made aloo gobi today, which, you understand, obviously. So I don't know, do you like South Indian food more or do you enjoy other types of Indian food as well?
Obviously most Indian restaurants are North Indian cuisine. So I get that. And at the same time, my mother-in-law has lived with us um, easily 15 years. And she's actually stopped cooking now, but those sort of dishes that she cooked to some degree have become my Indian comfort food. And like the pleasure of standing over a stove and making doshas and just watching it and just watching the bubbles and then deciding when to flip it. It's like very soothing and very comforting.
Anyway, I'm sure we should get together someday, California to Florida.
There
Uh,
you go.
so let's talk about parenting. You obviously are a parent yourself.
I am a
So tell
parent
us-
and a step parent
Yeah, so tell us about your
of,
journey.
of young adults. They are now 30, 27, and 26.
Okay, so you've obviously done your job, they're on their own, and they are no
They're
longer
fully baked.
fully baked in that perspective. So the questions typically I have are just three questions. The first is, how do you influence your children with the values that are important to you? And I know you mentioned something before as well. The second question is more about career choices because a lot of people are confused at 18 and they're made to decide on a profession, which I think is pretty tough. And then the third one is money, because I think that's an area which is very relevant but not really talked about much. So let's start with influencing your children in the area of values that are important. How do you do that? How would you recommend? Tell us a little bit about that.
So, to begin with, I think we need to make it clear that we are teaching our kids values whether we want to or not. And so we have a choice. We can be deliberate about teaching those values, or we can just live our lives and trust that they are going to absorb our values. And believe me, Minesh, every decision that you've made in life has either been in alignment with your parents' values or rejecting your parents' values, unless you have consciously examined it and really asked the question, this was a value in my family. How did it serve me? To what degree did it serve me? To what degree do I want to continue with that? Right? If you are not consciously looking at it, you're either in alignment or rejecting. Yeah. So then I think that as parents, we can focus in on some areas deliberately. And one of the reasons that I feel this is so important is because we're not in alignment as a society anymore, right? This didn't used to be so hard because we lived in communities that had values that were much more aligned. And so as we sent our children out into the world, the values at home were getting reinforced in the way that they interacted with the world. And that's not happening, right? So, and even as we all sit with our devices in the same room, we enter into the World Wide Web and we are each on our own worlds. So if we are going to, and our children are spending less time with us, right? So when you add all of these up, my feeling is that we need to be more deliberate about the choices we make. So I work with parents to choose what are the 2 or 3 values that they have in common, right? Because you've got a set of values and there's, if we're doing our Venn diagram, there's overlap between what you and your wife have, and then there's not overlap. And that's perfectly fine. But for parenting, it's going to be easier to focus on where we have overlap. So where do you have overlap? And then prioritize them. And then pick 2, maybe maximum 3 things that you're going to focus on. Just because our kids can't absorb a lot more. So then I have parents work with their kids, sit down with their kids and work with their kids through, and I always use respect. That was the rule in my classroom. I had 3 rules in my classroom. Let the teacher teach, let students learn, be respectful. But one of the differences between my classroom and a lot of other classrooms was that I spent almost 2 weeks sitting down with my kids saying, what does respect sound like, look like, feel like? What's respect for yourself, respect for others, respect for property? So that we laid this very strong foundation. So when I said it was the only rule, that was not that. It was like the umbrella rule and then underneath it. But what it meant was that instead of doing a lot of nagging and a lot of, well, you didn't say and this, that, or the other, because I had spent all this time having all these conversations, then if something came up in class, actually all I really needed to do was kind of walk towards the sign. And I would keep teaching and I'd just gently put my hand, we would write it out as an agreement, we would sign it. And I'd just put my hand up there and look lovingly at, the kids who were talking in the back of the room. Or I could just stop, just say, like, is what's going on here respectful? And usually they just kind of pull themselves in because we had come to this super clear agreement. And we had spent a lot of time talking about how do you benefit? Like, not how do I benefit by having respect in the classroom? How do you benefit? Like, why does it feel much better to walk into Mrs. Stitt's classroom than somebody else's classroom? And so I want families to do that at home. And it doesn't have to be respect. It could be helpfulness, kindness, thoughtfulness, hard work, diligence, curiosity. I've had families who have chosen curiosity as a question, which is great because then I just teach parents to use the phrase, I'm curious in front of things. Like, I'm curious what needs to happen to make this room organized. And now we've got the embodiment of the value while we're also getting the room cleaned up.
Very interesting. And I agree with you totally that, in fact, I remember teaching junior achievement, which used to be one of the classes that I would teach for a few weeks in elementary and middle school in Michigan. And I remember one of the teachers was like, you are acting like a dictator. And all I was asking for is, hey, before you speak, raise your hand, which was generally another sign of being respectful, right? You're going to be respectful that others are talking and you want to get permission before you speak. And I feel that a lot of schools, colleges have gone away with the respectful boundaries, and hence there is more chaos, which is happening. And in my personal situation, I heard the song Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon. Do you remember that song?
I do. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I heard the song before I was a parent. And I said, I will not be the parent who is not there with children. So guess what? I've homeschooled my children, and my daughter is now 20, my son is 16. And in general, the value systems that I want are more or less there. Obviously, I have some challenges as well, just like every parent does. But I know the basics are in place in general. And that was important for me. And I wanted to spend time with them in order to be able to do them, which is a very critical component of parenting anyway. So let's go to the second part about career choices. I know those were middle school, but your children are also grown up from, obviously old enough to have their own careers now. So tell me, what are your thoughts on teaching, guiding children in making career choices?
I think it starts when we start enrolling our kids in activities. I think it starts, and there's a balance, of course, because you may have a value of music education, for example, and kids usually go through a stage of being excited about music and then not being excited about music. And so you may, when they're in the not excited stage, you may say, nope, we're continuing with this. This is what we do in our family. We learn to play the piano, or we learn to do it. But alongside that, very often, like January is the time when January, Feb, we're looking for summer programs, right? And we're trying to get our kids and our summer schedule worked out. And usually we do this big machinations based on our schedules and everything else. And then we sign our kids up for things. And then we're upset when they're not interested. If we give even a first, second, third grader, of course, we're there, we're helping. But if we give them more choice in what do you want to spend your free time doing, they still may not like it. But then you're in the position as a parent to shrug your shoulders and to go, well, next time you'll pick something else. Like, now you know you don't like it. Okay. Whereas if we've picked it for them, then we are setting up this conflict. Now, when they don't like it, they're in conflict with something we picked for them. And that doesn't feel very good for us. And we kind of have to take responsibility for thinking that it was something that they would like. Now, if it's something we think they need, that's different. But if we're just trying to have the summer filled with fun, interesting activities, I'd like to see parents right from the beginning let their kids be involved. The caveat, and this is a big caveat, is I don't want to see kids overscheduled, because as a trend, because our kids now are in childcare more, they have a lot less time when they are unsupervised and without a device in their hand. And if I could really say, what do I want? That's what I would want. I would want to increase the amount of time when kids are, well, not unsupervised, but lightly supervised with no access to screens.
I agree with you.
Right? So now maybe, I work from home, maybe I'm working from home, and I've 3 years in a row, I've managed to have my niece and nephews come for a week and stay with me in Monterey. And the first year was really hard on all of us, because there was a lot of like, I don't know what to do with myself right now. And the second year was better, and the third year was brilliant. The third year was like, they were like, goodbye, we're going. Like, Amai, we'll see you. We're going here and here and here. And they had their bikes and their bike locks and cash that they had made. They would find jobs to do in the morning. I'd pay them. And they would just be off and doing things. And the kinds of things that they learned by being out and figuring things out. I have a checklist called the Are You Raising an Adult checklist. And one of the things is using transportation, even if it's your bike. But I find that most kids sit in the back seat of their car and they've got their earbuds in and they have no idea where they're going. And they magically show up places and they are not developing any sort of spatial relationship of there's no internal map of the area that they live in. So these kids have now developed it for Monterey and have taken off to new places that I didn't know you could ride your bike there. That's awesome. So when we allow this, and then, it's so ironic because we want our kids to develop a passion, but then we keep pushing them in certain directions rather than opening things up and seeing where things come. And my daughter went to what my husband referred to as the crunchy granola school. But one of the things that it had was it had a choice period every day, like a really very open elective period. And there was woodworking and library and choir and PE and the ceramics room and the general art room and the weaving room. And she tried all those things. And sort of from 4th to 8th grade, she spent more and more time in the ceramics room. So then when she went to high school, she signed up for ceramics. And when she went to college, she signed up for ceramics. She wasn't a ceramics major, but it was part of her experience and part of her growth. And during COVID, she built a tiny ceramic studio on a trailer, which is now, when it left, she built it at her dad's house. It's now gone to where she's living. And she goes, I have to do a shameless plug here, self-made pottery. Find her on Instagram. And when I see that she's like been out in her tiny studio doing her ceramics, I know that she has something which is truly hers.
Very
and it's
interesting.
easier to think about that in terms of a hobby. But I would like parents to try to keep that same open attitude around academic areas as well. I always laugh that I love summer camp, sleepaway summer camp, because you go to sleepaway summer camp and maybe you sign up for archery all week and you get the prize for being the best archer. But when you come home, your parents don't immediately say, oh, we should get you an archery tutor. And I wonder what schools have good archery teams. Like, we don't take archery that seriously. And so a child has had an opportunity to engage in an activity which they were able to really give their all to, like commit themselves to for the week and work hard enough to get the best prize without it having to be the end all and the be all.
Correct.
And I think that when we give kids these academic experiences also without having it to be the end all, then we can kind of see what are they truly interested in? What truly comes up for them? And the more open-ended and project-based and explorative, the better. Because again, it's going to give them more of a sense of knowing themselves. When they know themselves and they have a direction, now we can step in with some parental guidance and help and advice and opportunities. I think, especially for teenagers, one of our key roles shifts to being the opportunity finder, but not the this is what you're going to do.
But I think the part which I think is very relevant, what you just mentioned, what I firmly believe in general, from the age of 16 to 22, children should be allowed to experiment in as many different places as possible. I would say about 6 months, semester at a time. I don't mean academics, so I want to be very clear on this. For those who want academics, go there, because I don't think college really serves the purpose that it should. Most people don't need college degrees anymore. If they want, they can go to YouTube University and everywhere else, and they can get enough information if they needed it. If you want to be a doctor, yeah, YouTube University is not going to be a good idea. But at the same time, if they were hands-on in a real world environment, 6 months in different, whatever, their interest level is. It's not that you force them into any one of them. But over the course of, I'm sure, 2 to 3 years, they would have a sense of, I enjoyed this. This looks like a good profession for me to be in, or this is not. But unfortunately, at too young an age, we are asking them to decide about their future career forever. And it traps them with two things, unfortunately. One is an identity crisis. Hey, if I only went to school for computer programming, that's all I can do. And now they don't have the bandwidth to try other things. Like I just talked to somebody who's 59 years old, got laid off as a software engineer. He went and upgraded his skill, and Google and Facebook has laid off so many people that he's struggling to find a job because his mindset says, this is all I trained myself in, so I cannot do anything different. And one of the options he was looking at is working as a cashier in a grocery store, which is just shocking to me. But that's because that identity is so strong that I cannot do anything else. And the second, which is connected to it, is to develop what is called fixed mindset, which I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And because of that, the fixed mindset means I cannot learn new skills, I cannot have a new identity. And that I think is hurting a lot of people in the traditional education system of just developing one of those things. So I agree with your daughter's example there, which is exactly what I would say. She had chance to experiment with different things over a time period. She developed some interest. And here's like self-made pottery is the Instagram. Is that the one you mentioned to me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Let's talk about money because again, it's an important area. And I generally believe that parenting is something which has to be taught, but most people don't think they need to learn, which is a challenge by itself, just like relationships. Most people need to be taught, but they don't learn or they actively go out and seek learning in that area. Money is one of those areas as well. So tell me, what was your idea, or looking back now, what are some of the things you would have either taught or you did teach that would serve them well in the area of money?
Yeah, that's a great question. And money literacy, financial literacy is the area that I feel that I failed the most as a parent. And when I made the shift from teaching to parenting coaching, I interviewed some people early on in 2015. And it was so helpful to really think about that and do that. And a couple people that I like. So Neil Godfrey wrote a book called Money Doesn't Grow on Trees. And she talks about teaching kids to be careful savers, but cheerful spenders, which I love because most kids have a money personality and they're either squirrels or, there's money to spend, let's go spend, and they just spend it, right? And so that's this balance. Let's learn to be careful savers. And at the same time, when we want to spend money, let's spend it guilt-free. Let's spend it with ease. Let's spend it thoughtfully. So I love what she said. And then Bill Dwight was a software engineer who had 5 kids in Palo Alto. And he was, he went from like handing out cash right, left, and center to creating a spreadsheet, but then not updating it more frequently, to going like, wait a minute, I'm an engineer, I can build an app for this. And so he built an app, and his mantra is kids cannot learn how to spend money, save money, without spending and saving money. And so you got to give them money in order to give them opportunities to practice using it. And I thought that was a really fabulous perspective. And this could, in today's world is really hard because it's even less concrete, right? A dollar bill is still just a symbol, but at least it feels like a concrete symbol. And if you lose it, you've lost it. And so I do think that with our little kids, we should start with concrete money, and even giving them the experience of, when you go to the ice cream store, or, those little experiences that you have, use cash instead of credit or your debit card, and let your children handle the money. Let them hand it over and get it back. And then start an allowance fairly young, so that you're starting to put the responsibility on them. And from a parenting point of view, one of the nice things about this is that, you get to running the gauntlet, I call it, in the grocery store when you get up to the counter, and right there are 27 different forms of sugar for your children to want and to beg you for. And you can still keep the rule of when do we eat sugar, but now you can pass the job over to them and say, well, that's on you. If you want that, that's on you. So that they get the chance to, to buy something. And, candy bars are like $2 now. I can't believe it. And so now, is it worth it? Did I eat it? Did I gobble it right up and now it was gone and then my $2 are gone? Or did I savor it? And do I really like this candy bar? Or was I just buying it because it was right there? So when we give little kids these opportunities to spend their own money on it, and we're not putting a lot of judgment on it, it's a great place to bring just curiosity. Like, oh, like you ate that super fast. So now the candy bar's gone and the money's gone. How does that feel? And to begin to have these conversations, I think are lower elementary school really appropriate things to do. I hope they're still learning about money at school. So having some opportunity. And then even if it's something you're buying, doing the counting out and returning it to you and bringing it back in. And again, you're standing right there, you're supporting them, but you're engaging their brain at that level. The next thing that I would say is that when they want to do their first entrepreneurial project, lemonade stand comes to mind. My sister and I sold persimmons. We had a persimmon tree at a time when you could only the fancy store had persimmons. You couldn't go to the general supermarket and get a persimmon. But instead of doing that parental thing of paying for all of the supplies and now letting the kids have all the profit, have some relationship there, give them the seed money, but be clear that you're gonna get paid back for this. Or you're gonna get paid back some percentage, depending on how old the kids are, right? You can always deflate the prices if you want to make it more doable for them to pay you back. But just having them go through the exercise of recognizing that even when I go to make money, oh, wait, I've got all these expenses to do. So lots of these opportunities, and the less the parent is saying this is what you should do and asking the question, okay, what needs to happen for that? So lots of questions, right? And then building it up and building up the next opportunity.
Yeah, I think all of those are very important. And I was just, in my brain, the wheels are turning. So in general, I think there are like 6 categories that come to my mind. The first is how to earn money. If children don't learn how to earn money, and you gave entrepreneurship as an example, right? Okay. The other part is giving, charitable, right? Because charity is important. The next part which comes to my mind is pay yourself first. So obviously saving money would be one of them. The other part which comes to my mind is essentials, right? You have to provide essentials. So things that you really have no choice, but you have to spend, whether it's the cell phone bill or the car gas or whatever else it is. Then you talk about the cheerful spender, which is the enjoyment part of it, right? Because you need to know how to spend the money in a way that you're enjoying it, not just spending money for the things which you have to meet. But I think one of the components which I never was taught, and I didn't really learn early on either, and I'm still learning, is investing, ROI. And I think if we break down these components and make sure that there is some curriculum, but again, how would you do that? So let children research that, become curious about how to actually get that, would be a good place to start for that. But the more I'm thinking, those are the guidelines that parents can provide. And the earlier, I didn't, so I'm not saying I did, but the earlier you can provide them, the easier it becomes. Like you said, people can learn decision making by making decisions. People can learn about money, about handling money, So it's just giving them real practical world knowledge and then teaching them to evaluate the options that they have. And I think that definitely would be a big help. So you mentioned about the book you have, etc.? What are some of the things that people can get access to that you would like to let them know about today?
Because we're talking about money, and money management is one of the items on my Are You Raising an Adult checklist, I think that's a great place for parents to go. Again, this is a question like I have a lot. I have a blog that I wrote probably again in 2015. Wasn't setting out to set the world on fire, but of all the blogs I've written, it's been one of the highest hit blogs, and it's on what can you expect your middle schooler. I don't actually remember what the actual blog is called, but that's what it's about. It's about what can we reasonably expect of a middle schooler. And I wrote the blog first. Eventually I wrote the Are You Raising an Adult checklist, and there's a lot of connection, as you can imagine. But we've got charts and lists for our 0 to 5 development. What can I expect my 2, 4, 6, 8-month-old to be able to do? My 18-month-old? What can, in all these different areas? But we don't really have a list. And the pendulum has swung towards parents serving their children in a capacity which it has gone over the line, right? Because it puts children above parents, and kids know, like instinctually, they know, well, I'm not paying for things. I don't have the job. I don't have the responsibility. I can't drive. I can't do all these things. So I need my parent to be in charge. But when they're sitting on the couch playing a video game or watching, or even doing their studying, and we're coming along and bringing them their food and their clean laundry, and we're being their prefrontal cortex by organizing when their sports are, and what do they need to get there, it's messing this up. And it's not giving kids a chance. And what's weird is that what we see is that kids aren't even wanting to step into adulthood, even though they haven't been asked to do anything which is like an adult. We see that in kids not wanting to get their driver's license. And right? I mean, I understand the argument. If you live in New York City and you're not getting your license, fine, right? You're in Chicago, fine. Even San Francisco, more or less, fine. But the most of us don't live in big cities. And most of us live in a car culture. And the fact that kids don't want to get a license means I'm perfectly happy to be chauffeured around, which means I am not stepping into adulthood.
Well, my son, he's turned 16 last week, and at 15, he can start getting a driver's permit. Okay. Now, my daughter was keen. She was like that. She got that done, right? My son just passed his permit, I think, last week. Okay. Just last week, because of the same issue that you're talking about. And he does work at Chick-fil-A right now, a few hours a week, not too many, because partly they were slow this month. And more important is, again, he does have homeschooling co-op and other activities as well. And I had to force him. It's like, okay, you got to go on a bike on the days that it is not inclement weather. Go on a bike, because I'm not letting my wife go be the chauffeur. My wife is comfortable being the chauffeur, which is exactly what you're talking about. And I'm like, no, not in my area of expertise. So he's still pretty far from learning personal responsibility that I would have liked long ago. My daughter, on the other hand, very quickly, early enough, she got working at my in-laws' Chinese restaurant.
Well, older daughters and girls, right? Older child, and she's a girl. So
well, true, but her
statistically,
personality
going
is
to be
also like
more in
mine.
line.
Well, her personality is like mine as well.
Yeah.
So she's more willing to take charge quickly and then do things, and she's phenomenal. I've never had an issue with her as a teenager or otherwise. Whenever I say something, she's like, okay, Dad, what can I do? Boom. And that's pretty rare. That's pretty rare. I don't know when she made a decision, how she made that decision, but I've never had an issue, like zero, which is unbelievable. Most people won't believe that. So I think it's an interesting journey in life to be a parent. And most of the people who are watching, listening, just remember, it's not going to be easy, but if you don't focus on giving them the tools early enough in life to be an adult, you are the one who is going to suffer further down the road with children living in a basement playing video games, right? And they're not being really good contributing citizens to the community either. So thank you for sharing that. Is there any other resource that you want to mention before we wrap up today?
I put out a weekly newsletter. I think it's superior. Yeah, I mean, it's not one age, it's more thematic.
Yeah.
And the themes of are you raising an adult, and how are you. One of my favorite questions for kids is, what's your plan for that?
And I
Right?
agree with you. I like your newsletter, so I can endorse that from my personal experience as well. So, Elizabeth, such a pleasure talking to you. You've been such a joyful parenting to talk to for me. And I know we've known each other for a long time, and it was fun coaching you at that time. And I can see that you've continuously grown. And it's fun to see the progress you've made and the contribution you're making in people's lives. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Minesh.